videos and you're going to wonder, what am I on? You don't want to know. More drugs than you use in college. More drugs than you use. Yeah, I use a fair amount in college. I'm taking more drugs now. That's scary. I'm too old to take that. All those drugs. But anyway, okay. It was fun when I was 20. It's not so much fun. But anyway, let's look at simple diffusion first. Now, simple diffusion also includes a very important process called osmosis, which is a subset of simple diffusion. In other words, all osmosis is a form of simple diffusion. However, there are many forms of simple diffusion that have nothing to do with osmosis. Okay, what is simple diffusion? It's the inherent tendency of molecules to go from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. And as we saw before, that is an exergonic process. Granted, it doesn't release that much energy, but it does release a little bit. Now, let's do kind of a little mental experiment here. I've got ourselves a nice beaker of water. In this beaker of water, I'm going to extremely carefully put in a pipette full of some kind of water-soluble dye, food coloring or whatever. And I'm going to gently release this little droplet, and then I'm going to gently pull the pipette out. So now what we have here is a concentrated droplet of dye. Now, by simple diffusion, the dye molecules are going to tend to go from the area of high concentration, the droplet of dye, to the areas of low concentration, which is the rest of the glass of water. So after a while, the dye is going to start spreading out. Now you can speed this process up by stirring, shaking, whatever the case is, but even without that, it will happen on its own. You wait longer and longer, and it spreads out even more. And then eventually you get to a point where the dye is evenly distributed throughout the whole water glass. You do not have to put any energy into it. You don't have to shake it, stir it, or what have you. That'll speed the process up, but it's not necessary. It will happen on its own. It may take minutes, even hours, but it'll happen. The reason why molecules go spontaneously from high to low concentration is this. Here's our dye droplet. Now here's a dye molecule in here. These molecules are moving around really fast, colliding with each other, bouncing around, and what have you. So most of the time, a molecule is going to bounce around and finally get kicked out of the droplet. It's much more likely a dye molecule is going to move out of the droplet than move deeper into the droplet. So it's really a matter of statistics. The odds of an individual dye molecule getting out of the droplet are much greater than the odds of the dye molecule getting into the droplet. So overall, things spread out. So simple diffusion obviously works in liquids, but works in all kinds of other media too. Give you a good case in point. Let's suppose last night, one of you folks here had a meal of baked beans and cabbage and washed it down with a bunch of beer. Now you come into class the next morning, the next day, and you're sitting down and the pressure is on. It's building and building and building. It's starting to hurt a little bit, so you look furtively around in the classroom. Is the coast clear? And you release in high concentration methane, hydrogen sulfide, other organic sulfur-containing molecules. So now, just beneath your seat are a whole bunch of these lovely aromatic molecules in very high concentration. But fear not, simple diffusion comes to the rescue, at least for you. Because the molecules will spontaneously move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So in a matter of seconds, the people sitting next to you are and then a couple minute or so later, people several seats away from you. What is that? I think it's coming from there, so I'm going this way. And then, in a few more minutes, I'm out here. We got a leak somewhere? But by that time, simple diffusion has distributed the concentrations of these molecules away from the culprit and throughout the entire room, even concentration. So I have no idea who is or was responsible for that offense. Okay, so simple diffusion, seriously folks, occurs in gases as well. It can even occur in solids, although it's a much slower process than solids. Now, all you guys, you've got your iPads and your iPhones and all kinds of electronics and stuff like that, all the Borg stuff, right? It would not exist if it wasn't for the process of simple diffusion. Because what do they do to make electronic circuits? They take a piece of highly purified silicon, and then they cover certain areas up to form a circuit pattern, and then they take certain elements, I think germanium is a common one, that they heat up to a point where it turns into a gas, and those molecules will diffuse a fraction of a micrometer into the silicon, which is still a solid. And that makes the circuit patterns in all these microelectronics. So simple diffusion, although slow, it can even occur inside solids as well. Okay, a couple other things about simple diffusion. Simple diffusion, the rate of diffusion is strongly dependent on the size of the molecule. Small molecules diffuse fast compared to big molecules. In fact, the rate is based on the square of the molecular weight. So if I have two molecules, one with a molecular weight of 100, the other with a molecular weight of 200, the larger molecule diffuses at 1/4 of the rate. If I have a molecule with a molecular weight of 1,000, the diffusion rate will be 1% that of the small molecule. So diffusion is strongly dependent on molecular weight. The bigger you are, the slower you go. Okay, now of course when you're talking about diffusion across membranes, what you got here, the diffusion is directly through the lipid bilayer. Now you have to have an area of high concentration and an area of low concentration. And simple diffusion, you're going to tend to cross the membrane going from high to low concentration. Now the thing is, one, molecular weight counts. The smaller you are, the easier it is to diffuse across the membrane. The faster the rate. Two, to diffuse across a lipid bilayer, that's a very hydrophobic environment. If you're a very polar molecule, you don't want to be caught dead inside a cell membrane. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of resistance to you crossing the membrane. So, the same molecular weight, the polar molecule will diffuse at a much lower rate than the hydrophobic molecule, even if the sizes are the same. So that's why we say we're going to prefer molecules that are small, hydrophobic, and preferably both. Now we see a number of examples of small hydrophobic molecules diffusing across cell membranes. Many of the gas anesthetics, for instance, are just that. So you inhale them into your lungs, and what happens? They diffuse across the membranes, they get into your bloodstream, they go up to your brain, and they knock you out, or at least they make you really loopy for a while. Ether is another example. You can get really high in ether, trust me. Do not, it's not advisable. Okay, have you ever read Hunter S. Thompson about the ether high? Okay, read it. Okay, but anyway, ether can get you very high. It used to be used as anesthetics. Actually, on the toxic sites, I don't use it so much anymore. But ether works quickly and effectively because it's small and very hydrophobic. It diffuses across membranes, gets in your bloodstream, and then diffuses out in the cells of your central nervous system very quickly. You take a good snootful of ether, within about 30 to 60 seconds, you're going to feel the effects. If you take too much of a snootful, you'll pass out. Okay, and some of the other things. Good old delta-9 THC, the active ingredient in marijuana. It's it's not too small a molecule, but it's extremely hydrophobic. So it diffuses across, especially if you inhale the stuff, unlike the former president. But what's going to be, yes, he said he smoked. Trust me, you do not smoke that stuff for taste, okay? Okay, but anyway, the thing is, it's hydrophobic. THC is an extremely hydrophobic molecule, so it can quickly diffuse across your membranes, especially membranes of the alveoli of your lungs, in your bloodstream, and within a few minutes after taking your last toke, you're going to start feeling the effects. A lot of small molecules diffuse quite easily across membranes. But if you're polar, or worse yet, if you're charged, the rate is much, much slower. Okay, so that's the basic idea behind simple diffusion. Now, in just a moment, we're going to take a look at a subset of simple diffusion that's actually extremely important in how cells work.